Welcome along to DigiShift82 from SCVO and Third Sector Lab. So today we're going to be talking about what you can do to protect your organisation against cyber attacks. So this is a topic that comes up a lot in the organisations that you work with. It's still one of the kind of mysterious areas for third sector organisations. So this session will hopefully provide you with some valuable insights along with some practical tips that are going to help you enhance your organisation's cyber resilience. And we're going to be guided today by two professionals in the field, and you'll get a chance to ask all your burning questions. So first up, we're going to hear from Alison Brogan, who's Cyber Resilience Co-ordinator at SCVO. She's bringing over 15 years of experience in cybersecurity. She's been in various roles that have been operational, managerial and consultancy positions across a number of areas. In her role at SCVO, she also coordinates the implementation of the Scottish Government's Third Sector Cyber Resilience Action Plan. We're also going to be joined today by Chris Oladogba, who is the Global Senior Manager of Information Technology at the Centre for Public Impact, which a lot of you might know as CPI. Chris brings a wealth of experience in helping organisations embrace digital to drive growth and engagement, and he ensures the smooth operation of CPI's technology use. And it's a passion for cybersecurity and a really excellent way of explaining cybersecurity in simple terms that hopefully everyone in the room can understand. So we're going to hear from Alison first at SCVO, and then Chris at CPI, and then we're going to open it up as usual for questions in the room. So Alison, I'll hand over to you first of all.
I'm going to attempt to share my screen, which hopefully works. You know, if you can see that, okay?
I can see your screen, yep.
Perfect. Although if I do that, sorry, 1 second. Okay, cool. So as Ross said, my name's Alison Brogan, and I'm the Cyber Resilience Co-ordinator at SCVO. So I work very closely with Scottish Government as part of the Cyber Scotland partnership, see the new logo at the bottom, to support the sector in becoming more cyber resilient. So today I want to give a wee overview, I guess, of the work that I've been doing so far since joining at the end of last year, and also just to talk about the free support that's available to third sector organisations to help you on your journey to becoming more cyber resilient. So since joining the organisation back in September, one of the number one things that I wanted to do was to establish a third sector cyber resilience working group. So you'll see all these lovely faces here make up our working group, and we meet on a quarterly basis to talk about the programme of work that we're doing to help improve cyber resilience. And so it's made up a range of people from across the sector. You may recognise some of the faces, some of the logos, and they're really there to help me help shape and help guide the programme. And so it's not just me doing it by myself, and they're making sure that we're delivering realistic and relevant resources. And so we've had quite a few meetings so far, and today I just want to give you a wee overview, I guess, some of the things that we've kind of done. So number one is that we've now created a dedicated space for third sector on the Cyber Scotland website. So the Cyber Scotland partnership, I should probably just give a wee overview of what that is. It brings together partners from across all sectors, not just third, to help improve and boost cyber resilience across the whole of Scotland, both organisations and just the general public. So on there is a wealth of information across all those different aspects. But what I wanted to do is have a space on there specifically for third sector to make it really easy for people to kind of find the information relevant to them. So if you go on there now, you'll see there's a section under organisations for third sector, which is managed by ourselves, and there's lots of information on there around relevant resources, upcoming events, and we've got a new quarterly bulletin on there too. So the idea is that this is going to be a single source of truth for Scotland's third sector for all things cyber resilience, and so it'll be constantly kept up to date. And our plan is actually to expand it over the coming months. But I'd say it's a great starting point at the moment if you're looking for any of the kind of factors here. On these points, so upcoming events, we've got SCVO's DigiNext, which is happening in September, and there's going to be some cyber workshops at that. We've got a trustees webinar scheduled in October. to talk about specifically cyber resilience in relation to boards, trustees. As I mentioned, we've got a new third sector cyber resilience bulletin, which is going to come out quarterly. And so there are Cyber Scotland bulletins on the website at the moment, but we've created one specifically for third sector. And we're hoping that this will be a really useful resource. So it's going to give a high level overview of common threats. It'll talk about any recent incidents that have happened within the third sector, any recent lessons learned. And it will also give an overview of this programme of work that I'm involved in. And the idea is it's really, short, sweet, easy to digest, and it's quarterly. So, you can have a look at that, every few months, and it should give kind of keep you up to date with what's going on. Resource-wise, there's a raft of resources on there at the moment. Some for this audience that you might kind of want to look at. We reference IASME's Cyber Essentials. They've got a readiness tool for organisations to look at to see how ready they might be for that certification and how they are tracking when it comes to cyber security. It also links out to some interesting guidance on whether you're working with external IT providers, which I know a lot of third sector organisations do, and what questions you might want to ask them around cyber. We've got the SCVO cyber readiness check, which you can look at to get an idea of how mature you are when it comes to cyber resilience and cyber security, and help give you a plan of what you might want to do next. And there's some just useful, there's various resources on it, but there's some useful guidance on kind of all aspects that you might need within your role. And my details are on there. So should you need any additional support, please do get in touch. I'm always looking for ideas on, if people have got ideas on kind of what they would need or what they think is missing, please let me know, because that's always useful for me to incorporate into the broader programme of work. But I'm also here to help. So, if you have a look at the website and you still don't feel like you've got everything that you need, or you just want to ask questions on the back of this meeting about, anything to do with cyber within the third sector, then please, reach out. I'm happy to talk to people. I love talking about it. So, yeah, please do get in touch. So I just want to put this slide up. I'm not going to go through it in great detail, but it's one of the resources that's on the website. And this is an infographic that's been created by the National Cybersecurity Centre, which is NCSC, if you see that mentioned anywhere. And it's one of the resources that we reference on the website for embedding cyber resilience. But I think it's a really useful one because it's been created specifically for small charities, and it provides advice on how to protect against the most common cyber attacks. So it's just some really simple steps on these kind of 5 kind of key topics that they kind of signpost to. So backing up your data, keeping your smartphones and your tablets safe, preventing malware, avoiding phishing, and using passwords to protect your information. So have a look through this, or reference it it's on the website. But if you're starting off into your journey on how you might want to think about embedding cybersecurity within your organisation, I think this is a really kind of simple and easy to use way of starting to kind of go through that. And as I said, if you did kind of come across any questions associated with it, please do get in touch. Happy to kind of talk through. And finally, I just wanted to give a little overview on what everyone else should be doing. I'm conscious this is DigiShift, but it's quite often the case, if your background is IT or is digital, that people think cyber is a problem for IT, and it's not. It's everyone's responsibility in improving cyber resilience. So I've just included a few ideas on here about how you might want to think about that within your organisation. So the first one is, make space on your agenda for cyber. So get your board thinking about cyber risk in a structured way. The new bulletin, I think, is a great way to keep your board up to date. And you could show that to them on a quarterly basis, and it should give them everything that they kind of need to think about it and think about what's important to them right now. But the website also references various other resources. So there's a free board toolkit actually that the National Cybersecurity Centre provide, and that's to help brief your board on the nature of cyber risks and their responsibilities, ensuring that those risks are being managed effectively. So I quite often signpost people to that. The next one is get your staff and your volunteers switched on when it comes to cyber. You know, they're the people that are using your IT systems every day. And so it's really important that they're cyber aware. Again, the website signposts to free e-learning modules that have been provided by the National Cybersecurity Centre, which you can easily embed within your existing training materials. And actually, as part of the programme of work that I'm doing at the moment, we're looking at currently developing a comms campaign that we'll put on the website that organisations can easily embed just to talk to their staff and their volunteers regularly about kind of hot topics when it comes to cyber, and try and make it really easy for people to embed that in their organisation. So watch the space for that. And the final one is preparation is key. You know, make sure you're ready for when a cyber incident occurs. Build out a cyber incident response plan now, rather than when you're in the thick of it and an incident is happening. Again, the website signposts to a free resource pack that can help you with this, and the programme of work that I'm involved in. We're actually developing a template specifically for third sector incident response plans at the moment. So that will go on the website once that's available, and hopefully just give people a really simple tool that they can use and fill in, you know, like contacts that you should speak to, comms that you should do, you know, what are your key services that you could not operate your organisation without. So that's all from me, really. I just wanted to give a kind of overview of the programme that I'm involved in, let people know that I'm here, and if people, you know, want any help, come to me. But, you know, a lot of stuff is on the website, so please do check it out, and let me know if you have any comments or feedback or see any gaps.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Alison. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions that come up in terms of how do organisations start in certain bits of this journey, and also how do we keep this going as well. And I think that's where those quarterly briefings become really important. Right, I'm going to hand over to Chris now from CPI, and then we'll have a chance for questions for both Chris and Alison.
Okay, thanks, Ross. I'm just going to share a few slides on here. Hopefully you can all see that at the moment. So I'm Chris. I'm just looking at this now thinking, right, I have a lot less hair than I did in that photo on there as well. So I should probably update that. But I work for the Centre for Public Impact, and at CPI, what we do is effectively work with people in and around government to help them think a little bit differently about impact and what that means to create positive impact for the people that we're trying to reach. And we do that through events, partnerships, just to get people thinking differently about the complexity of impact. And in terms of my role, I just help our staff use tech effectively. I've been at CPI for about just coming over to 7 years now as well. And it started off more on the kind of pure digital side, where it is website development, social media, email marketing. And I think towards the end of 2020, we made the move fully remote. And I think in that move for us, like a lot of other organisations, we had to take a little bit more of a mature approach, I think, to how we set up our staff and our workforce to kind of work, whether that's in a coffee shop, at home, at the desk, or a kind of co-working space, how that would actually work without compromising the data that we store, keeping us safe, and having people just to feel that they can work wherever they are in the world effectively, and also keep a sense of collaboration and togetherness in a workforce. So my role has moved away from the kind of digital side or the website and development side of things to a little bit more about how we collaborate as a distributed team around the world. So I'm just going to keep it this brief with here as well. I'm just going to go through 3 things that we have started to work on or are continuing to work on to help kind of like improve our approach to cybersecurity. And in a nutshell, there are things that Alison touched on, I think, in the presentation before as well. But these are the 3 things that we've got some real good momentum with that we're going to build on. The first one is cybersecurity training. Then we go into the Cyber Essentials certification and AI. So I'm just going to briefly touch on these 3 points, and you might be able to take away a few things from there to implement for yourselves, or it might make you think about things you might want to work on a little bit in the future. So first up, cybersecurity training. I think this is where we've had the most kind of impact, because I think from someone that is kind of like working in this, I think on a day-to-day, it can be quite a challenge getting your workforce to think about why they need to be doing this in the first place. And we kind of like took the kind of route of first up educating them why they need to do this, and thinking beyond just cybersecurity within the workplace, because it can sometimes feel like a bit of a chore. There's like another thing that I need to have to do to kind of, you know, get my work done and all that kind of stuff. And it's really not the case that we're trying to like increase workloads, but we tried to frame it around obviously we want to protect the information that we have, we want to protect our devices and our staff, but also upskill people in, you know, cybersecurity in the real world, because this doesn't just affect your work, it affects how you share things with your friends, links you may get on like a text message or anything like that as well. So we tried to widen it. Yes, the focus is about, you know, the way you work at CPI, but also how you kind of like navigate this day to day. So I think having that kind of like framing in there was a little bit, it was a good way to kind of get a lot more buy-in, because it's a bit of like behavioral change, really, having someone to think about something extra on top of the work that they're already doing. So we framed it like that to get a lot more buy-in. And there were tools that we used to help with this as well. As much as, you know, I like to think I know a lot about cybersecurity, I don't know everything at all. And we used a third-party IT team to help to think about some of this as well. And also a platform that we'd used is called Know Before, which kind of like helps create a series of training that people can do on a regular basis. So we do a few modules monthly for team members to go through, and it gives you a bit of a score. And every month you can kind of like look at the scores that your workforce is looking at, and it's things to kind of think about for content to remind people about things to think about with regards to cybersecurity. So I definitely recommend that. Obviously, the tools Alison had and mentioned on there as well are really, really good ways to kind of think about training that you might want to share with your team. And also Charity Digital is a website that I've used a hell of a lot to get some ideas and in some of the things that are kind of like happening day to day. I think within cyber risk and things that you might want to share with your workforce. Also, we use kind of like events and things that have happened in the workplace as examples of what we can do maybe differently from this as well. So I've definitely found that the training part has been like a real kind of like win, where we've had people just kind of like asking kind of just general questions around kind of things, or people thinking of being a bit more proactive before they click on links or share files and things like that. So I definitely encourage you to, either if you have like an intranet or a weekly bulletin email that you kind of like send around, to think about including some things to think about for that. The next part is the Cyber Essentials certification. I think for us at CPI, due to the people that, or the partners that we work with, organisations, we're starting to see a lot more of them vetting organisations for their kind of or proof that they are doing something about their approach to cyber. And I think for us, rather than every time we kind of like, you know, try to start a partnership and we list out what we're doing, you know, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're doing this, Cyber Essentials for us is almost like a bit of a rubber stamp to kind of like help us kind of be clear about our stance and how we're taking it seriously. So for us, kind of, we've gone for the Cyber Essentials Plus certification, which is not for everyone on here as well. But I think this, or thinking about doing this or putting your organization through this process is a good way to not only just see areas where you may be kind of need some improvement, but also it kind of like holds you to a bit of a higher standard, I think, in terms of how you approach cybersecurity. And one of the things that we have found really helpful is the IASME Cyber Essentials Readiness Tool, which kind of like gives you a bit of a framework to work for, to know if you're kind of like ready for the assessment on there as well. So I definitely recommend going through that and just being honest with the questions that are on there to see how you kind of compare for that as well. And we found the Cyber Essentials just helps us. One, it's a lot quicker process to kind of bid for work or the partnerships that we're trying to work at CPI, and also just helps us like look at things that maybe we need to kind of like work and bolster a little bit more in terms of like how we share data, the tools that we use, how we kind of vet other people that we partner with in terms of cybersecurity as well. So it's definitely helped us open our eyes up to kind of things that we could be doing better. And I think particularly with the Cyber Essentials Plus, I think you need to renew it annually. So it kind of like holds us accountable, I think, to just making sure we're doing the things that we should be doing with regards to cyber. So it's definitely something that you should definitely look into. It's not for everyone, I say, and it can, depending on the size of your organisation, budgets. It can be a bit of a lengthy process within this as well. So, but it's definitely something to work towards for sure. And the next bit is AI. Obviously a hot topic at the moment on here, and I think both for good and bad. Whereas some of the threats that we're kind of like seeing there are used by AI to kind of like make them really hard to track or to fight against. But also on the other side of that, there are a lot of AI tools on there that kind of like are a little bit more proactive in kind of mitigating against any threats that organizations have. So we use something called like endpoint, which kind of like helps to kind of, before somebody even receives an email or a link, it kind of like hunts those threats down before they even kind of like get to us. So it's a bit of a firewall before anything kind of like gets to us. It's a bit more proactive. So rather than reacting after the fact, it's a bit more proactive on that as well. So where we kind of like look at it is we look at what's out there and work with our third party or outsourced IT team to look at what would make sense for us as an organization to use on that basis, and also to just educate staff internally about some of the threats that are out there enabled by AI to try and combat that. So it's definitely something to think about. And one of the resources that I'll talk about a little bit after these few slides is the NCSC has I think they had a report in 2020 last year. I think that kind of like look at some of the top or the big kind of like threats from an AI point of view as well. So it's definitely worth having a look at that. And we use that to just try and see what's out there so we can try and keep ahead of the game with it as much as possible. So yeah, that's AI. So yeah, some useful resources, and I've touched on a few of these. Alison's mentioned some great ones with Cyber Scotland, which I was unaware of before I met Alison as well. So I'm definitely going to be taking up some of those for sure in my day-to-day work. But a few things to kind of think about or to look at is the NCSC cyber threat report. It's got loads, I think, on there in terms of the kind of latest threats, vulnerabilities for the charity sector specifically on there, and how people are or can combat that, and ideas for educating, training, enabling staff, I think, in terms of cyber threats that are out there. And also Charity Digital. You may have already heard of Charity Digital as well, but on there you get a hell of a lot of not only discounts for a lot of tools that I've mentioned on here as well, but ideas, podcasts, updates on the kind of like the latest trends within tech more generally. So it's definitely worth signing up to that and just having a look at the site there. So yeah, that's it, short and sweet, I think, from me, but hopefully some stuff you can either take away and look at or add into your to how you bolster your approach to cyber.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Chris. That was great. That was excellent. Okay. So I think we're going to open up questions just now, and I'm sure there'll be lots and lots of questions that come in from the room. Would anyone like to start? You can either raise your hand or unmute, or if you prefer, you can pop it in the chat box and I will ask the question for you. So whatever works for you. Anyone fancy going first? It's also okay if everyone's a bit shy and would like me to start, so that's totally fine. So I'm really interested in the Cyber Essentials accreditation. I think, some of the points that Chris made about actually giving a competitive advantage, and a lot of local authorities now won't accept bids from charities unless they have Cyber Essentials accreditation. And it'd be good, if both of you want to come in this one, just to give a sense of how long the process can often take, what kind of amounts of money we're talking about, and just any other advice on going through that process, and whether or not we feel that most kind of charities should be thinking about Cyber Essential accreditation in the future. So Alison, do you want to go first, and then we can hear from Chris?
Yeah, sure. So actually one of the first initiatives that we've looked at in the programme, we've actually commissioned a piece of work to look into the barriers of uptake to Cyber Essentials within the third sector in Scotland. So it's a piece of research work. Some people may have seen we did a survey over the past couple of months, which we've had quite a good response to. So we should get the report out of that, I think by the end of this month, which will help us then work out next steps for the programme on what we want to do when it comes to Cyber Essentials for third sector. Advice, obviously, I would have a look at the readiness tool as a starting point rather than jumping straight into the certification, would be my kind of initial thoughts. But as Chris mentioned, it's not going to be for everyone, but obviously there is these requirements, coming out of you need it to get certain tenders, and that's something that we're discussing with Scottish Government. Scottish Government are on the working group as well, so they're aware of the conversations that we're having in this space, because it might not be, as Chris said, for everyone, because there's costs associated with it, and it can be quite a lengthy process depending on where you are in your maturity for cybersecurity to actually obtain the certification, but also what capability you have in-house to understand it, because it is quite technical, even though it has been written in a way to try and make it as easy to understand as possible. I went through the readiness tool the other day, and I felt like some people might need extra support to do that. Cyber Essentials do have an advisor scheme where you can get support to run through the readiness tool to get your certification. But obviously with that does actually come a cost as well. So, we're looking at that just now as part of the programme, and are hoping to do kind of some support in that space for the third sector and helping them attain it should they need to. But also, the working group actually spoke about this last week. We'll clarify on the website, when is it right for you, and if it's not necessarily right for you as an organisation, what might be other things that you would want to consider. It's not that you shouldn't do it, everyone should do it if they can do it, but there will be limitations to people who just can't. So, what do you do in those instances, and how can we help support you to do that? So that's something that we're looking at the moment.
Brilliant, thanks, Alison. Chris, anything you'd like to comment on that one?
Yeah, I'd agree with a lot of what Alison mentioned on there as well. And I guess for us at CPI, we've gone for the Cyber Essentials Plus, because I think it just adds another kind of I guess bolstering, I think, of our setup here, and also the requirements of the people that, or the organizations that we partner with. It makes it a lot easier for us to kind of like bid for a lot of that work. But I will say as well, it can be quite a lengthy process. I think for us, 6 months of work have gone into kind of us making sure that devices are where they need to be. We have the education in place for staff to do that. And there is a cost element as well. For us, we did, working with our IT partner, a bit of a SWOT analysis beforehand to kind of understand where our kind of like benchmark is, because obviously we've done a little bit of work before going for Cyber Essentials Plus, but this kind of brought out things that we need to make sure we need to, one, educate staff about, simple things like, latest software that we have patched on devices, how we're doing that regularly, how we're all sharing information externally, internally, who has access to certain bits of data, I think, within CPI. So making sure we have our ducks in a row on that then before going for it. But the SWOT analysis that we did helped us identify a lot of that. So as Alison's mentioned, Cyber Essentials Plus isn't for everyone. It's not needed for everyone, depending on the type of work that you do. But the IASME readiness tool is definitely something I only noticed that after speaking with Alison, I think on that as well. But it's definitely a good place to start, I think, just to kind of create some awareness on some of the things that you may need to change before going for the certification. But yeah, I would agree that it does take a bit of work and a bit of effort to kind of like get you there. But I'd still say it's worth doing. Maybe not the Cyber Essentials Plus for everyone, but Cyber Essentials, it's definitely worth doing that, even if it's just to kind of open your eyes out to some of the requirements for that, to see where you can almost place yourself amongst those requirements.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Chris. Yeah, and I think particularly for those kind of medium to larger charities, without the Cyber Essentials accreditation, what I've found is charities are they're kind of skirting around the edges of cyber and not really making the right commitment a lot of the time. And particularly where most charities I work with of every size are really time pressed at the moment, is that it's finding that time that you've described to actually commit to do this stuff when you've got a million other things on your plate. So I guess one of the other big questions that we'll probably come on to throughout this, and I'm going to pick up some of the questions that are in chat first, just something that I'd like us to be thinking about is like, how do we free up time at board level and senior management team level to make sure that cyber is not a priority? And what I've often seen happen in the sector is like, we've got an IT company, they deal with that thing, and it's almost we kind of outsource responsibility. So that's something I'd love to kind of pick up a wee bit later. There's a really specific question coming from Susan, which I particularly like. Have there been any examples of charities who've been hacked by AI generated deepfake voice cloning? Do either of you two know the answer to that question? I love the specificness of that question, Susan.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything specifically for charities that has come that people have admitted to, I would say. It can be quite hard sometimes to get people to talk about when they've been impacted by a cyber attack. But yeah, nothing that I'm aware of so far specifically for charities, but there obviously have been instances across, other sectors, and we're seeing it in like the general public as well. There's quite a lot of instances of that, but nothing that I've heard of at the moment specifically within charity sector. That's not to say that it obviously won't happen.
Yeah.
But I don't know, Chris, if you're aware.
No, we haven't, but we have a good module on that actually, for one of our Know Before, where we have some well-known celebrities actually saying stuff that they shouldn't, but it looks like it's coming from them. But on another note on that, one of the things that is similar to it, which we have seen a little bit on the rise, is spoofing of emails, particularly from new members of staff, where someone has updated a LinkedIn profile and said they work somewhere new. And then what happens is that our director's email has been sort of like spoofed, so it will have Adrian's name, obviously slightly variation of the email address, going to the new joiner saying, "Oh, can you send me this, etc., etc., or click on this link." And obviously the person new to the organization doesn't really know any better and will then try to click on the link. So we have it kind of almost like spoof email detector that kind of like will alert you to where we have a list of everybody in the CPI, and doesn't have a recognized email address for that, but the first name is a bit of a match. So it will alert you to that when those similar emails come through. So those are ones that I've seen a little bit on the rise in different kind of like variations, but definitely targeting newer joiners to organizations in that way.
Yep, brilliant. Thank you so much. I mean, probably slightly as an aside, Susan, I think there's also an issue within the sector about kind of misinformation, and whether that's through stuff like deepfake voice cloning, or simply say the CPI have released research that shows X, Y, and Z when actually they have not done that, or a spokesman from Oxfam said this when actually they never said that thing in the first place. And I think there's something where cybersecurity also blends into kind of a lot around kind of reputation and risk. And actually for me, there's something about the sector monitoring where brand mentions happen, which is something you should be doing anyway, for positive reasons, but also sometimes for the negative reasons where people are potentially faking stuff that your organization has said or done. Right, okay. Keely's got a question actually going back to Cyber Essentials about what are the key differences between Cyber Essentials and then Cyber Essentials Plus, if a charity is deciding whether the yearly commitment is for them. Anyone want to comment on that one?
I don't mind on that one. I think for us, where we found the big difference was the device security. I think for us, we found there was a lot more emphasis on what we were doing to ensure devices were updated regularly, which meant there was an actual cost for us to kind of update the devices that we had for staff on here as well. So so out of that, I'd definitely be aware, I think, of going for the plus. There can be an additional cost to your organization as a result of that. You know, there are loads of other kind of like basic things that you can kind of like do within your organizations with like what was I going to say then? In terms of like antivirus and things like that, which aren't as time intensive and easier. And again, it depends on the size of your workforce. But we have found the kind of device security and how we manage that from a global point of view was definitely the big difference for us.
Right, thank you, Chris. Okay, and I think within that as well is like if you're, particularly if you're a Scotland-based organisation, getting involved in some of the work that Alison's doing and speaking to other organisations that have already gone down this road can be really, really powerful. So yes, take the guidance and take the information, but actually speaking to a similar charity to figure out how they've done this stuff. So if you're a social care organisation, who's a social care organisation, you know, who's already got the Cyber Essential accreditation, and what did that look like for them? Because there's going to be nuances within the sector about the type of information you hold and what cybersecurity looks like and feels like for you. Tarek, this is a question that Tarek's got probably for Alison. Tarek, do you want to kind of come on and ask that one yourself, or if you're comfortable?
Yep. Hi everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess so. Like Chris was mentioning, we were using like Know Before as well as part of our like cyber kind of like training, which has been really useful. Actually, so would like really recommend that as well. But yeah, so going back to the accreditation, so along with our IT support partner, we've been going through the Cyber Essentials accreditation, just like the basic one. And I was already conscious that many of our mobiles that we use are out of date in terms of their security patches and whatnot, and already knew that we were going to fail, but it was still useful to go through like the whole process and stuff, so we can just put it in black and white where we're lacking at the moment and what we need to do to address that and then move on and pass, hopefully. But I just wondered whether anybody knew of any sources of like funding for pieces of equipment, for example, or training that you know the charities could apply for.
So there's, I guess, so for training, you mean like cyber training?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't think there's anything open specifically at the moment. One of the outputs though from the Cyber Essentials research piece that I've commissioned, we are going to look at whether or not there's opportunities or instances where we should look at funding on the back of that, to help people potentially obtain Cyber Essentials or to help them with obtaining it or getting to the level that they need to be to pass it. So that's something that we are looking at it, but there's nothing open at the moment. But Maddie might have something around just general device digital funding, because that's more on the IT side of things.
Yeah.
So she may be able to kind of comment if there's anything around giving people new devices or helping people obtain new devices. But when it comes to training, we just at the moment are referencing free training that's available. I know that there's some work within Scottish Government around boards specifically, and they're doing a piece around ensuring boards are brought up to speed when it comes to cyber, and they're looking to roll that out within the third sector as well. So obviously once that's kind of confirmed, that would go in on the website and in the bulletin to let people know about that. But I don't think there's anything else at the moment, specifically around training either.
Thank you.
Anything, Maddie, you wanted to come in?
Just
Oh, sorry, Chris, on you go first.
no worries. Just to add to that, it might be worth checking out the charity digital website, because I know they do a lot of discounts on software on there as well. And one of the things that we have looked at, I think, we had a bit of a challenge with mobile devices as well. What we have moved to is completely stop distributing them from us CPI centrally, but used to a VoIP system. So there are a few others that you could use out there, like Zoom does a great one for us that we use. And we found that within our workforce, most staff had the most up-to-date devices, iOS. And I think in terms of us ensuring that people had the latest one, it's a requirement, I think, for us that staff had the latest iOS or Android for our platforms at CPI, and VoIP services kind of like been a great way for us to kind of like I hate using the word control, but to kind of like de-risk, I think, us with any kind of like vulnerabilities on there as well, and to just make it as flexible as ever, because not everyone likes to carry 2 phones around. It's not always ideal. So that has been a kind of like a bit of a move that we've kind of like gone to do. So VoIP is probably like maybe something to look into, and also Charity Digital, definitely have a look. We have a Zoom discount with them actually, which is quite a considerable discount. So I'd definitely be worth checking it out.
Thanks, Chris. That's really useful. Maddie, anything you wanted to add in to that one? No. Okay.
No, nothing. What I normally do is just ask folk to speak to our IT team. Our IT team are normally pretty happy to chat to people about what we use and about how we go about it in SCVO. So they're always tech side of always like speak to our excellent IT team at SCVO. They're always very helpful.
There's a question in from Jack in the chat box. I'll let Chris and Alison, I'll let you read it. And I can read it out for benefit of everyone else as well. So when I go to bed at night, I lock all the doors and windows. I know there are ways of getting inside the house, but is there a list of all the things and ways that attacks can enter the office, like down the wire? By this, I mean, how can customer database be attacked, destroyed, copies and stolen? What other damage can be done? Does switching off equal locking the front door? So probably the last question there is probably kind of sums up that question in its entirety. Does switching off equal locking the front door? So anyone want to come in on that? Just to, I guess, maybe a summary of when we're talking about cybersecurity and potential threats and attacks, what in general this looks like for the charity sector. And then maybe a brief overview of things we can do to mitigate. Now, I'm also conscious that like this could be a whole other workshop in its entirety. So we can kind of keep it fairly brief, and maybe we can signpost to some resources that will help with this as well. So Chris, do you want to go first, and then maybe Alison?
Yeah, sure. Jack, very good question on there as well. But one thing I would say from the top is definitely have a read of that NCSC report, because I think it lists out a lot of the kind of like common vulnerabilities for specifically the charity sector. But also, I think the big thing that we found is how staff share information, and getting them to think a little bit more before they share stuff. So we use, and I think a lot of IT people probably have a fit about this as well. We use Google Workspace for a lot of the sharing that we do within, just because it's very flexible for us to use within CPI. Everyone knows how to use Google products more generally. And we have a lot of education around the best way to share a lot of these, a lot of the information that we have, which can, if shared incorrectly, can have a negative effect on who has access to information, personal data, etc., etc. So I think a lot of the kind of like education we've kind of like based is about how you as an individual can kind of reduce your risk by the way you share, interact with data that you have access to with CPI. So we've used that as the kind of like main point of it, but also thinking about that from a more general point of view in your day-to-day life. You know, if you are on WhatsApp with friends and you're sharing things, you know, you've got to think about, you know, who has access to this link or this information that I'm sharing. Is the thing that I'm sharing actually safe to share to other people? And to think about it from that point of view also. So it hits home a little bit more. But I think a good way to kind of like get an overview of the kind of like top issues is definitely see that NCSC report, because it lists a lot of them out in there.
Thanks, Chris. Alison, anything you want to comment on that one?
Yeah, so I'd say, yeah, that report is quite hefty. But there's loads of useful information in it. Ransomware is the #1 threat impacting not just third sector, all sectors within the UK and across, you'll see it in that report. So that's what kind of they're calling out just now, but there's obviously multiple other different types of ways that people can get in. What I would say though is NCSC though have brought out that infographic though. The idea is that you can read the report, but obviously as I said, it takes me hours to read it when it comes out each year. But the idea is that the infographic is telling you kind of the simple steps you can take to combat the top threat. So I think to the point that was made of, what are the quick things that I could do, I would say have a look at that if you're starting out from scratch. The idea is that if you do everything on that list, you're mitigating your risk against those common threats that have come out of that report. Equally though, the readiness tool as well, which is free, you don't have to pay to do that, but the Cyber Essentials readiness, the whole point of Cyber Essentials as well is to get assurance that you're protected from those common threats. And that's kind of its tagline. So running through that readiness tool, you don't need to have an in-depth understanding, I don't think, of the threats themselves, but it'll give you, these are the things that that security company recommend. You put these mitigations in place and you'll be in a better place being protected against those common threats. And so running through that is a nice kind of way to kind of get that assurance, is what I would kind of suggest, which we've obviously spoken about already. And I'd love to think that we could switch everything off and we'd be safe. If you cleared all your data from everywhere and then switched off everything, then yeah, I guess quite often people come to me and they'll talk about cybersecurity, but they have no digital presence. I'm like, well, in that instance there is no cybersecurity concern, so you're all good. But in reality, your data will likely be in the cloud. Your data is elsewhere. So switching off your machine at the end of the day isn't going to, unfortunately, protect your information, which will probably be everywhere and anywhere. So, so sadly that doesn't work. But yeah, taking those kind of initial steps to look at what controls you can put in place, what mitigating factors you can put in place is definitely a step in the right direction.
Can I just ask, there'll be charities in the room just now that don't have a head of IT or really anyone internally working on digital, and for those organisations, have you seen that there's a kind of common role that works best in terms of who needs to take responsibility? Like, it could be the chief exec, could be someone who works in a finance team. Are there kind of common themes within that, or does it not matter too much, but it needs that one person taking responsibility?
Tends to be the person that has some sort of interest in digital, no matter what their role is within the organisation, or no one is, and someone just has to take it on, independent if they want to, because it is such a big part, right, of organisations now. Like, it's kind of after the pandemic, pretty much every charity has got some sort of digital presence, even if they didn't have before. So yeah, you're right, it is, and that is a concern, I think, is that people are being given that kind of responsibility when maybe they don't know where to start, or maybe it's just something that they're not comfortable with and they're being asked to be comfortable with it or do something in that space and take responsibility for it. And that is a big part of what we want to do with the next phase of the website, to be honest. So the content just now, there's just a lot of content on there, but I want to try and think about those different types of users and the journey that they might go through. So we're going to try and tailor the content to be a bit more. So are you, a head of IT for a large third sector organisation, or are you working for like a small to medium-sized charity, and have been given the responsibility of digital but have no kind of background in digital, and you know, what might that look like, and tailoring the content, because the content would be different, you know, depending on who we're speaking to. So that's the evolution of the website throughout the rest of this year, is we want to try and tailor it so that it kind of meets all the different user needs, but it's not quite there yet. So what I would ask though is, if people are kind of unsure, then just reach out to us and we can help.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Alison. Chris, anything you want to add on that one?
Yeah, as in as being the tech guy, I guess at CPI, I think my role kind of has like progressed from doing the digital website stuff, and I think as we hit the pandemic, it was like right, who's going to do it? And it's like all eyes were on me, all eyes were on me in terms of how we're going to navigate us going remotely. But you know, as being somebody that was kind of within that space and had an understanding, you know, it was cool for me to be able to do that, but agree not everybody has that person in their organization to do that. And I think this is where it comes back to, I think one of the points Alison made, cyber security is not just an IT thing. It's like everyone has to take some responsibility for this, because no one really wants to be the person in the organization which creates the breach that gets you slapped with a massive fine. So I think it's in your interest to be proactive in understanding what you can do to upskill yourself. I think in whatever organization you work in, to make sure that you know how to navigate digital. So you know, this doesn't happen to you, because everyone, I think a lot of the time people think, oh, this won't happen to me, or we'll never kind of like do all this kind of stuff. And not, you know, within my role, it's not for me to kind of like scaremonger people into taking this seriously, but it's more to kind of like arm you with a tool so you can use this stuff at whatever organization you work at, not just here at CPI. But yeah, and I think throughout this process, I think for me, it's definitely helped me to kind of like upskill myself in terms of like understanding like the things that actually matter to the workforce in terms of like tech, and how to use that as a way to kind of get people to engage in the conversation around it. Because, you know, not everyone wants to talk about cyber security, but if you can kind of like engage in a way that will help them outside of the workplace, I found it's definitely helped us to get a lot more buy-in. And I think talking about buy-in, I think for an organization like CPI, where I'm a kind of like team of one, I think, but we have support from an external IT team, having that kind of like buy-in from our director and our operations team behind this definitely helps us in kind of like pushing our kind of thinking about cybersecurity and why we should be taking it a little more serious. It makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, and Tarek's put a really good point actually just in the chat there about if someone internally has an interest, even if they're not an expert, that they should be involved in the managing the IT support company. Because I guess what I've seen is organizations willing to kind of make the spend, but it just gets pushed as someone else's responsibility, and nobody's really managing that relationship. And you know, as Alison described, that there's threats emerging all the time, and what might that quarterly check-in look like with your managed IT company, and who's asking the right questions as part of that. And it should definitely be, for me, something that's sitting on the board agenda and something that's sitting at a senior management team agenda as well. So if it's not, and these are where the tools that both Chris and Alison described are really useful, is using the particularly I've found that infographic is really useful as a kind of checklist of like, where are we at on this journey, and where are the areas where we fall short, and how do we speak to our supported IT company to think about where we mitigate against some of these risks that we're worried about. There'll be some areas in that infographic where actually as an organisation you've maybe never even discussed them before. So just starting that conversation, I think, is a really important next steps. Some really good stuff coming in there from Laura in the chat box as well. I'm very conscious of time, so we've got about 3 minutes left. So what I would love is just if there's any kind of parting, just one bit of advice you could give people in the room, Chris and Alison, just go for it. Even if it's something really small, that'd be a great way to finish. So Chris, do you want to go first, and then we'll hear from Alison?
Yeah, I would say try not to get too overwhelmed with trying to do too much on this, because it can be a daunting process. As someone who's kind of like doing it in a team of one, it can be a lot to kind of like keep up to speed with, because things are changing all the time. But what I would kind of like say to you is to start the conversation about it in your organizations, about cybersecurity, what are people most worried about, and have conversations from that point of view, and then it can build up to something wider where you're, having, you're taking it a little, you're maturing your approach to it as well. So I definitely encourage you all to like open up the conversation, at least to kind of like get to a baseline point of what the understanding is within your organization with regards to cyber, and then build up from there.
Right, that's great advice, Chris. Thank you. Alison, do you want to jump in?
I mean, I feel like I have to say, check out the website. And all the information I think that we've spoken about today is all referenced there. So we're trying to keep it simple so that we're not sending you links to loads of different places. Just go to that one place, and hopefully it references everything that you need on there. And then I guess I have to say, apologies for saying two things, that preparation is key, just to re-emphasize that, because we've not really gone into much more detail about that, but it's going to happen at some point. Unfortunately, there's going to be a breach within your organization at some point. So having plans in place, to make sure that you're managing that risk and that you know what to do when it happens, even if it's a really simple, straightforward plan of who do I speak to, or how do I communicate with the rest of my organization, should I not be able to access any of my digital devices, is kind of a big one for me, is if you can take that away and just have a think about that. I think that would just make a lot of us feel more comfortable, sleep easier, knowing that you'd know what to do if that was when that happens.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That's taken us very neatly on to 11 a.m. and we're going to finish up there. Thank you so much to Chris and Alison. That was excellent. There's some really good feedback in the chat box as well. And I think just reiterating those things that Chris and Alison have said is like take those next small steps, start the conversation, and look at those really good resources that you can lean on. Like, nobody needs to be guessing their way through this stuff. There's good support, there's good guidance, there's good information on it. So thanks, Chris. Thanks, Alison. That was excellent. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We'll be back next month.